The Symbols of Greatness, Dr. Jonathan Schuma. Introduction. When we go back in history, we shall see an innumerable multitude of people who were considered to be great. What made these people great? Were they self-made? Were they schooled into it? Was life's experiences their teacher? Were they under some form of mentorship? The bottom line of all these is their unique stories that their lives will tell. All through their lives, they encountered many things, some bearable and others too painful to describe. However, they left a legacy of greatness through their symbols of greatness. Chapter 1. Adam and Eve. This was the first couple on the planet. They seemed to have it all together and good. They enjoyed the power of God vested on them and accomplished what no human could do, the task of giving names to all creation that God had created. However, this did not go on for long. The evil one invaded their lives and wrecked their lives. This resulted in them being banished from the haven of Eden. It must have been painful to fall from the glory of God and reduced to a life without power. The supernatural power of God that could accomplish more than one could imagine. Each moment Adam was working tilling the land, he must have been reminded of the pain of giving up the awesome gift from the Father. He could not blame his wife for the deception that resulted in her being beguiled by the serpent. He had to accept the consequences of the choices they had made. When they had their children, it was a great comfort to see their sons Cain and Abel. They must have brought great joy, seeing one become a successful farmer and the other at animal husbandry. One day the unthinkable happened. Cain murdered his brother. When God, who is all-knowing and all-powerful, questioned Cain, he responded with arrogance. "Am I my brother's keeper?" Yet he knew what he had done. This incident may have brought so much pain to Adam and Eve. It was a serious reminder of their previous actions, that they were paying for their sins. Abel was murdered and could not be found. Furthermore, Cain was banished and sent away by God as a vagabond. This meant the couple had lost 2 sons in one day. This may have created a scar in their memory. They will have to live with the pain of the loss. What lessons can be drawn from this account? When we are given instructions, we must follow through and obey. We must not allow relationships we have, no matter how dear and close to contest with the instructions of God. Furthermore, when we step out of line of the will of God, there are consequences. These are sometimes immediate, while at other times they are passed on to the coming generations. Therefore, before something grows in its magnitude, we need to address it now and today. This is so because as a problem proceeds into generations, it grows in impact and cannot be undone with a casual approach. Chapter 2. Noah. He found grace with the Lord at the point in time when God was grieved that he had made man. God was grieved because of the many sins and atrocities committed not just by man, but by the fallen angels with man. The fallen angels had canal relations with human women and begat giants. These giants eventually enslaved humanity. Other than that, there were many things that had happened. In other words, humanity became extremely wicked. Genesis 6:13. God said to Noah, "I intend to make an end of all flesh, for through man the land is filled with violence, and behold, I will destroy them and the land." God further went on to give specific instructions of what he expected of Noah. He went ahead and began to build the ark. It was a mammoth task that may have taken time to accomplish. While he was building the ark, he was preaching to the people of what God was about to do. He must have urged them to repent and turn away from their evil ways. But his words had fallen on deaf ears. They continued with their evil ways. The most amazing thing which happened was the fact that animals listened to the warning and started entering into the ark in pairs of male and female. As those animals were entering the ark, the people around could see the phenomena, but this could not provoke their senses that it was unusual. Men and women will preach to us, but there comes a time when men can no longer be used, but creation will begin to preach to us. As we observe daily happenings, there will be a divine message being preached. We do not have to harden our hearts when creation begins to preach to us. We must wise up because this may be a sign of the end time. Noah stood at the entrance of the ark as various species of animals entered the ark. In disbelief, he saw people mocking him and God that no rain would come. When all the animals were fully secure inside, God closed the door. In the days that followed, great rain, which they people of that time had never experienced, came. And the people started moving to higher grounds, thinking they will be safe. But unfortunately, the water level kept on rising and rising until there was nowhere to go or a tree to climb. All the people perished according to the word of the Lord as instructed. What lessons can be learned from this account? Firstly, when God is about to do something new and great, he will partner with a human being whom he will tell the details of the calamites to come. He will offer a solution before the problem ensues. And it's up to the people of that dispensation to heed to the instructions. Secondly, a godless life has consequences of death. The godless for a season will seem to be on top and having all power and influence. They may say all manner of mocking words which may waken the faith of believers, but suddenly a shaking comes in all that they thought they had and hold on to crumbles. The sovereignty of God prevails. Pride is swallowed by death. Thoroughly each day we are faced with a choice like Noah, the choice of choosing the pleasure of life or obedience of God. The world at some point may look so glamorous and appealing. The opinions of people may be too many to the point that one may begin to doubt the inner convictions of the Holy Spirit. It is at such times when each one will have his or her defining moment. This is to choose which side they will be on. It is when one makes their choice in the midst of various pressures that we are able to know who a person really is. It is not always the choices that everyone approves which the Lord approves. Some choices may lead to one being labeled as an outcast. It could be painful to be rejected by the world, but accepted by God. It is through such moments that the person whom the Lord desires is made. It is through the scars that the man of greatness is made and approved by God. In the process of making the man or woman to be used by God in any dispensation, we are going to lose some people and friends. Such a lose is for one's good, so that you can be the vessel that is approved by God. Noah may have had so many friends, and through them had a network of connections that could have been good for him in some respects. But he lost all that when all the people died under the judgment of God through the flood. We seriously must be willing to let go of the friends and connections we have when God is at work. If we hold on to such, it could cost our destiny and divine calling. Chapter 3, Abraham. Abraham was a great man and the father of faith whom we can learn from in various dimensions of his life. He had an awesome relationship with God. The account of Abraham begins with God calling him out of his father's household. This may have not been an easy thing to live a place he was familiar with and comfortable in. As we peruse the Bible, we see various accounts when God was about to do something great or use a person. He always had to move them from their familiar territory and take them to a place of unknown. This may be for one reason, so that the person may entirely depend on God, who knows the beginning from the end. God called Abraham and told him that he was the father of many nations. However, even if he was the father of many nations, he did not have a child of his own. In his mind, he thought his servant would be the one who will take his inheritance. But this was not the plan and purpose of God. Abraham had to wait for many years for the son of promise. We too will have to wait on God. He may have said something prophetically, and this may seem to delay. As one is waiting on God, there will be times and seasons of testing. The enemy will bring to us something that may appear like the very thing which God promised. But we need to be guided by the Spirit of God to know and discern that this is of God or not. We may have an Ishmael that may try to cancel the promised Isaac. Such moments are so painful, and we may begin to question the sovereignty of God. We need to be patient, because when an Ishmael comes, our faith may be put to a test, and it may be difficult to be restored back in faith. However, the grace of God is ever sufficient for the vessels who are willing to be broken and molded by the hand of God past all the pains of the process. When the Son of Promise came, God asked for him to be offered as a sacrifice. How many of us would be willing to give up what we have waited for so many years to acquire? How many of us would willingly give up what will carry our legacy in the coming generations? It's at such defining moments that the Heavenly Father finds out where the essence of our lives lie. The reality is that when we willingly give up what God has asked for, in his wisdom, he has ways of saving the very thing, even when we see that we're going to lose it. but when we hold back, we are most likely going to lose much more. The thing we have been asked to offer, as well as the blessings that will come with obedience. We must not be afraid of the scars that will be created by obeying the Lord. It is through these scars and life's experiences where stars of greatness are birthed. The greatness of Father Abraham was only revealed through his obedience. It is through his obedience that the prototype of what God was to do in future was set to save humanity from the sin of Adam and Eve. Chapter 4. Esau and Jacob. We are intrigued by twins. They seem to bring a lot of awe. The birth of these two was amazing because they seem to have had a battle in the womb of their mother. Prophetically, it was ordained that the older will serve the younger. However, as we grow older, the things that are ordained to happen may happen and will happen as God has planned. But because of hunger, Esau despised his birthright and sold it to his younger brother for a meal. And at the time when he did this, he did not know that he was selling away his future. Many of us in a moment can act like Esau. We become so desperate to the point that we put away rational thinking. We simply focus on the moment of getting the thing we so desperately need. We need to evaluate our thinking and emotions. We could be using our emotions to make decisions that may affect our destiny and cause us to suffer in the days and years to come. We have two kinds of people in this life. The first is the kind which will sail their future for present gratification. The other kind is the one projects into the future, sees the value of the thing they want to buy, and eventually buy it off using good negotiation skills of persuasion. The first kind of the person create a scar with their decisions. They usually do not realize that they are creating a scar. Their choices seem good and pleasant at the time. They enjoy the proceeds of what they have sold in the moment. But as time passes, then reality dawns. They now begin to think through the transaction they earlier made. They soon realize that they have made a serious mistake with the deal they made. It is usually too late to reverse the transaction. A serious scar is created, and they have to live with the pain for the rest of their lives. The second kind of a person thrives on the mistakes of others. They are usually good negotiators who see opportunities where others don't. They are usually skimmers who use deception to get the things they want. They usually appeal to another person's desires. They always portray a picture of having other people's interests at heart. They interact with people with a view of winning their hearts. But in the end, people hardly realize that they were used. But it is usually too late when people get to find out. But it is always after they have accomplished their mission, signed the deal, and have left. This is when people get to realize what had just happened. They are good and cunning, but in the end, they leave unforgettable scars. They are brilliant, and as they create scars with their deals, people seldom see that they are being taken advantage of. They have a way of appealing to people that gives them away with them easily. Jacob seemed to have gotten away with what he did with his brother. Furthermore, when it was time to receive the blessing from the father, he went on and pretended to be Esau and took his blessing. Deception seems to pay off for some time, but the people who have this kind of nature live with fear. They know one day their evil will catch up with them, although they think their skimming will always open doors for them. But this is not always the case. Encounter of transformation. You will one day have an encounter that will not just change your life, but will revolutionize it as well. An encounter is like a defining moment where one redefines who they are in the moment and who they will be in the years to come. It is this redefinition which brings about change in so many ways and areas. In Genesis 32, Jacob wrestled with a man. This man was not an ordinary man. I believe he was an angel. The wrestling went on because Jacob was strong. The angel had to touch the hollow of his thigh to put it out of joint, thereby creating a weakness for him to let go. But Jacob persisted. He said he was not going to let go until he received a blessing or a pronouncement of a blessing. The man asked for his name. He responded that it was Jacob, meaning supplanter, schemer, trickster, and swindler. He was told that he would no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, meaning contender with God, because you have contended and have power with God and with men and have prevailed. And he declared a blessing on Jacob. After this encounter, Jacob now changed to Israel. You also, like Jacob, will have your life changed and transformed when you have a personal encounter. Transformation is one of the greatest experiences that one can have, better than being conformed. Being conformed only makes a person respond to various factors of one's environment and be dictated by them so that they determine how you act and respond. But when a person has been sincerely transformed, the factors or forces of any particular environment will not have a hold on them. The person will be changed in a positive direction. Note that such change is permanent and not seasonal. Such change is transgenerational. As in the case of Jacob, each new season which came, he was no longer the same. The way he walked changed because of the impact of wrestling with the angel. He had a reminder of an encounter he had with an angel. The angel left him with a scar. As he progressed with his life from that moment, he became a great person, and the experiences of life seemed to have become great lessons. He was constantly reminded that it does not pay to be a person he was in the past. But he thought of learning from the mistakes of his past so that he could be an authority to speak into the lives of others in the future. The message remained in the scar. Chapter 5. Joseph. The story of Joseph is an interesting account that many authors have referred to from the Bible. This is to illustrate numerous lessons. He was born in a family of 12, but among his siblings, he was the favorite of his father's children. As a way of attesting to this fact, the father made a bright coat for him and made him stand out among his brothers because of its beauty and bright colors which radiated from it. He was a dreamer, and many times he talked about his dreams. This was the main reason why his brothers hated him. They were afraid that the dreams may become a reality. The brothers would end up having insignificant lives that would not have any positive influence. One day Joseph had a dream and decided to tell his brothers as well as the father. This dream shocked the brothers and father. The brothers hated him even more, but due to the above fact, they conspired to harm him. They caught him, tore his coat, and put blood on it, and later sold him as a slave when they went back home. They told their father that he was devoured by a ferocious beast and died. They could only recover the coat to attest to the fact. As we live with our siblings, we may think they all have our interests at heart. This was what Joseph thought. However, he was shocked by the actions that the brother took. Many times we tend to think our enemies are from very far, but the truth is that our greatest enemies are close and within our own household. It is usually difficult to discern and know them. We only tend to know them when they have already acted out their evil plans, and usually it is too late to undo the sting of their venom. I can only imagine how betrayed Joseph could have felt when his brothers sold him. He could not believe what was happening. It looked like a joke and a dream. But when he was finally handed over to be taken as a slave, reality dawned. As he was taken into slavery, he could have had a mix of emotions of hurt because of the actions of his brothers. This left a serious emotional and mental scar that could not easily be done away with. Furthermore, to add salt to injury, while in the household of Potiphar, he was accused of a crime that he did not commit and was sentenced to prison. He was accused of wanting to have carnal relations with Potiphar's wife. In prison, he had plenty of time to reflect on the incidents which happened. He saw an evil seed of rejection manifesting among his siblings, which resulted in him being sold as a slave. In addition, being accused of attempted rape was quite despicable. The two incidents may have created a serious mental and emotional scar. He could have had some voices whispering in his ear, "Reject rapist." This could have been a sure receipt for mental torture. Furthermore, as these situations surrounded him in prison, he did not focus on his predicament. He decided to look to God because he felt he was the one who had the final say of what his life was going to become. The Bible tells that he had favor in the house of Potiphar even before he was sentenced in prison. While in prison, he still had favor as well. When God is making a person for greatness, the person in question may have to go through various pains and trials. The road to greatness is not sudden, but a process. The process certainly takes time before the person is approved. Many times the road to greatness looks dark and slippery, but it takes patience and endurance to emerge as the man or woman of the hour of greatness. The period of pain and separation from people and things that are dear is a time of personal discovery. Each person will have a personal defining moment. It is a period of self-search to find out why you are here on earth, who you are, what abilities you possess, whether you are a solution to your generation, and what impact you could bring given an enabling platform. Now, in prison, Joseph had companions who had dreams, and he was the one who gave them their interpretations. One was freed from prison and the other was hanged, according to the interpretations of each person's dreams. Joseph discovered the gift of interpreting dreams. The very gift he discovered was what eventually made a way at the fullness of time. He was called to interpret the dreams of Pharaoh. This consequently led to his release from prison. By divine appointment from above, he was elevated to a position of leadership. What lesson can we learn from this account? The scars of today will eventually be the bedrock of the greatness of tomorrow. What is important is not to abort the process, though it may be painful and time-consuming. The scars of yesterday are the lessons of preparation for tomorrow's assignment. When you endure up to the end, God will turn one's scars into stars, and people from all walks of life will come to the brightness of your shining. You may not need to prove yourself that you are the man suited for the task. Everything and people around you will be the ones to speak for you that you have passed the test and surely ready to lead or offer a solution to navigate the organization out of tragedy. Chapter 6. Moses. He was born a Hebrew, but was raised as an Egyptian. He was schooled and trained in the ways of the Egyptians and was mentored to be next in the scheme of leadership of the land. One day he saw an Israelite being abused by an Egyptian soldier. He was moved with compassion, but his reaction was with rage. He killed the soldier. He was later told that he was not an Egyptian, but a Hebrew. He believed he was part of the system of the taskmasters, and the fact that he had killed an Egyptian soldier was a serious crime, and he knew the consequences of his actions. He was a murderer yet to be found out and convicted of his crime. He had spent his past 40 years preparing to rise as the next Pharaoh, but unfortunately, all these dreams were now shattered. He was stricken by fear that he could be found out. As he thought of his half-brother, Ramesses, he could hear whispers in his conscience saying, "Murderer." It would not be long before he would be found out. This scar was unbearable for him to the point that he had to flee. He ran from the system he was supposed to assume eminence, as well as his people, the Hebrews. These were his blood whom he was supposed to find comfort and solace. He was 40 years when he left and ran away. In the place where he had gone, he found a wife married and had a son. It was during this exile period that he had an encounter with the burning bush and met God. He was given instructions of what to do by God. This time he was to return to Egypt, not just as Moses, but as a deliverer to liberate God's people from bondage of over 400 years. No matter how sodded one's life has been, God can use murderers and rejects for his plan and purpose. When we look at Moses, he did not qualify from human point of view to be used by God because he was a murderer. He had a scar which spoke so loud, murderer. But God is able to silence or look beyond the scars and use the person to conform to his purpose. According to the plan of God, the Israelites were delivered out of bondage of over 400 years. And the man once a murderer was the vessel that was used. Moses lived with the scar for 40 years. During this period, God was preparing him for a great mission and assignment. Any person who will be used for a great purpose will have to go through a lengthy period of preparation. When the vessel is ready, God will bring out the vessel and announce to the people that this is the man of the season, hear him. Chapter 7. Samson. He was a man of extraordinary strength. He was a judge, but much of his life, he lived like a person on an expedition of adventure. The secret of his strength was in the fact that he was a Nazirite, a man set apart for the purpose of God. The secret was only known to his parents as well as himself. He was always available to defend his people and do the will of God, but much of his time was spent on his personal pursuits. He was warned several times by his parents to stay away from Philistine women. This was so because the Philistines were enemies of God's people. Unfortunately, such counsel always fell on deaf ears. He persisted in going after strange women. He seemed to have been overtaken by fleshly passion other than the purpose for which he was born, the purpose of being a judge. A lesson we can learn from this account is that God will not impose himself on us even when we are born for a greater cause. We certainly need to work out our salvation and decide to live in line with the will of God so that he can empower us to do his will. As we look at the life of Samson, we see that God does not take back the gifts he gives. We can continue living sinful lives, but still have the power behind the gift we are born with. Samson still used his power, even if he was living way out of line as a judge and leader of God's people. The moral aspect of his life was a disaster, but God was still with him. I am not advocating that people become carefree with their moral lives. I am encouraging you as a reader, in spite of your weaknesses that you may have, do not throw in the towel. You must believe God can use you in one way for his ultimate good. You may be looking down at yourself that you have wasted so many years, but it's never too late to step up and be available to be used by God. What is your secret? Samson had a secret of his strength, and his parents vowed never to disclose it to anyone. The secret was to protect their son from harm of their enemies. It was also to safeguard the Israelites from being taken advantage of. Their son was their defense. We may have some secrets. These could be of our sordid past, or it could be how we improved our lives and became better. These secrets could be of twofold, bad or good. Who has got wind of our secrets? Have our enemies deciphered our hidden secrets? If they have, then we must be living on the edge, because sooner or later all hell will break loose and create serious scars of both physical and emotional destruction. In addition, the people that we may have entrusted with our secrets could one day be beguiled and forced to disclose. All human beings are gullible and have a breaking point. The fact that no one has found out those pressure points of breaking in the lives of those who hold your secret does not make you safe. Samson had a breaking point, and Delilah was the tool used to influence him to the point that he gave up his secret as soon as he had given her the information. This information was used against him. They first cut off his hair, and secondly, they made him blind. The real question here arises: are we ready to give up what holds our life for the sake of love or lust? When the soldiers of the Philistines took Samson and did him harm, he realized that the woman was used as bait to attack his life. He not only lost his hair and strength, but also his eyes. This left him with a serious scar that he could never undo. As he was in prison being constantly tormented by the Philistines, he had plenty of time to reflect on the counsel of his parents, the things he had gone through, where he had gone wrong, and how his choices led to where he was. In the midst of the torture, his hair was growing, but he concealed it. The growth factor tells us that no matter how much time we think we have lost through wrong decisions, as we grow, we learn from our mistakes and grow into wiser and rational beings whom God can turn their story of scars we created and use the scars as symbols of his glory. Samson was taken in a temple where the Philistines were celebrating conquering the Israelites and decided to display Samson as their spoil of victory. He had tormented them for many years. In the midst of this celebration, he got hold of the pillars that held the building and made a prayer before the Almighty God. It was not a self-centered prayer. He prayed that God would use him one last time for the sake the scars of losing his eyes and, above all, the greatness of God Almighty. And God gave him his request. We are told that more Philistines died with him than the number he had killed while he was alive. A great lesson we learn is that true selfless leadership brings great results that can never be compared to one where the person is conscious of self and what people will think. Some scars which we bear have great testimony which outlives the owner of the scars. In addition, the scars also come to overshadow all previous weaknesses which the person may have had. This is why this saying stands true. The deeds of a person continue to speak even when the person is in the grave. Chapter 8. Jonah. All humans as they come on earth, each has a specific assignment which they must fulfill. But it takes time to come to terms with this fact and discover what is to be done, when to take up the challenge and how to accomplish it. Many will spend their lives experimenting and trying to be what their parents tell them. And beyond the counsel of the parents and many friends, as well as associates, is a divine assignment which me's carry out. Jonah had an assignment. This was to go and deliver a message to Nineveh. But unfortunately, he did not go. Instead, he ran away from this task and took a journey in the opposite direction from the place of his assignment. He got on a ship and paid the fare to run away from his assignment. Many people are like Jonah. They know their assignment on earth, but have not taken it up. They instead have abandoned it and began something entirely different from the vocation they are supposed to follow. They do not even want anyone or situation to remind them of where they are supposed to be and do. God in his sovereignty has a way of catching individuals and reminding them of where they are supposed to be. You may be like Jonah and have run away from your vocation, but sooner or later God will locate you and redirect you back to your assignment. Jonah was located in the ship to Tarshish and thrown in the sea where God sent a whale that swallowed him and took him back to the place of his assignment where he was supposed to be. What was going on in his mind as he was in the belly of the fish? He was amazed that he was alive instead of being dead. What would you do if you were in a place like this? Just close your eyes and visualize yourself in such a place. You will be reminded of the greatness of God. This would be the first thing. Then you would ask God to forgive you for running away from your assignment. You would ask for a second chance to go back and fulfill the assignment. This may have been the sequence of thoughts which could have been going on as Jonah was in the belly of the fish. And God answered his prayers and directed the whale to vomit him on the shores of the banks of Nineveh. As he stood up on the shores with the smell of gastric fluid that was around him, and probably his hair and skin was bleached, he did not mind what people would say. He had a new zeal for his mission. The scar he had acquired from his experience was great for him not to do anything about. He began his assignment speaking to the people of the land, warning them of what God was going to do if they did not repent and turn away from their wicked ways. All in all, the people repented, turned away from their evil ways, and turned to God. Chapter 9, Jesus. He is the supreme and ultimate example of the symbols of greatness. He was born miraculously of a virgin and raised as a human being like the rest of humanity, even if he is and was the Son of God. He grew up both in wisdom and stature under the guidance of his parents Joseph and Mary. The first part of his life, from the day he was born up to when he turned age 30. This was a period of preparation. It was at the age of 30 when he was baptized and was publicly declared as the Son of God. This was with the witness of the Holy Spirit descending on him in form of a dove. And a voice from heaven was heard in the clouds declaring, "This is my beloved Son." Jesus did a lot of great works which are too numerous to document. And since every person who is born on earth comes with a specific assignment, he also came with one as well. This was to reconcile man back to God, because through Adam all humanity had sinned. But through the death of the Son of God, the whole human race could be restored back to God. Humanity had a number of challenges. These could be solved through one ultimate sacrifice of the life of Jesus. He was poor so that we can be rich. He was scarred beyond recognition when he was beaten 39 stripes. It is through these scars that all diseases that we can name that we are presently healed. He was crucified and made a public spectacle for the whole world to see the power of God. And before he died, he uttered the words, "It is finished." This meant that he had accomplished his assignment. He was later buried, and after 3 days, he rose triumphing over death. Death could not hold him, and him who had power of death, the devil, was defeated. Jesus is the only being who has living scars that speak volumes of his testimony of the greatness of God. It is through these symbols that we are able to change and be transformed. These scars are forever living, speaking of his greatness. This is why he is given a name, that at the mention of the name Jesus, every knee must bow and every tongue confess that he is Lord of lords and King of kings. As he seats on the right hand of God, he raises his hands to remind humanity and all evil principalities that he paid the price for each and every person so that we can be liberated from the evil handwriting written, supervised by ancestral powers, and empowered by the devil. It is through scars, the symbols of greatness, that the voices of hell are silenced and the powers of darkness paralyzed. He has opened a door for everyone who believes in him to have a transformed life, a life with meaning and empowered by his grace. Chapter 10, Greatest African Leaders of All Time. What does it take to go down as a great leader on the African continent? Perhaps it requires perseverance and dedication. What about responsibility? Surely with enormous power comes great responsibility. The personalities we are about to explore had more to them than the above character traits. These African men and women had the highest sense of responsibility mixed with heavy doses of altruism. Heroes and heroine of their times, These leaders were willing to put everything on the line to encounter the unknown and articulate change in Africa. Join us as we take a journey down memory lane to explore the 10 greatest African leaders of the contemporary era. Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela was one of Africa's finest citizens and statesmen. He was a South African president, 1994 to 1999, who fought against the apartheid political system in the country. As South Africa's first black president, his government tackled key racial systems that segregated and tore apart the country's diverse races. Mandela was a revolutionary who got imprisoned on several occasions for his activism. When he was released after 27 years behind bars, his African National Congress, ANC party, won the 1994 general election. Mandela forgave all his enemies and created reconciliation commissions, chaired by Anglican Archbishop Desmond Tutu, to probe past human rights violations. He won a Nobel Peace Prize in 1993 for his peace-loving life in Haile Selassie. Haile Selassie, also known as Ras Tafari Makonnen, was an Ethiopian ruler and emperor from 1916 to 1974. Undoubtedly, Selassie was one of the biggest sons of Africa whose name can never be erased from history. Even at a young age, Selassie showed promising intellectual capacity. His intelligence quickly earned him political appointments from the Ethiopian emperor. Selassie eventually became emperor of Ethiopia upon the death of his father-in-law. During his reign, several schools were constructed, social injustice fell, and the security forces of the state were strengthened. Selassie used his immense influence on the continent to push for a more united Africa. He went on to build an extensive network of ties with African communities in the diaspora, as well as other Caribbean islands. Up to this day, some circles within those communities, particularly the Rastafari community, often regard him as the reincarnated Messiah, Net Kwame Nkrumah. Kwame Nkrumah is a highly revered Ghanaian politician who led the country in 1957, formerly Gold Coast, to gain independence from the country's colonial masters, Britain. One can conclude that he was the founder of Ghana without being too wrong. Nkrumah was the first president and prime minister of Ghana. He was a Pan-Africanist who co-founded the Africa Union, AU, formerly the Organization of African Union. Nkrumah returned to Gold Coast after studying abroad for 12 years. He became a revolutionary who got arrested for causing political riots. His tenure as president saw massive developmental projects across the length and breadth of Ghana. Nkrumah's legacy in Ghana, and even beyond, is unparalleled. Julius Nyerere. Julius Nyerere is another unforgettable hero of the African continent. He was the first president and prime minister of Tanzania, formerly Tanganyika. His rule as a statesman lasted from 1961 to 1985. As an intellectual who had master's degrees in economics and history, Nyerere was an African nationalist and a socialist. In 1953, Julius Nyerere co-founded the TANU, Tanganyika African National Union. As president of TANU, Nyerere piled a lot of pressure on Britain for self-rule and governance. His efforts finally paid off on the 9th of December 1961, as Tanzania gained independence. Patrice Lumumba. Lumumba was a revolutionary Congo politician who helped the country to gain independence. He was the first prime minister of the Republic of Congo, now called DR Congo, from September-July of 1960. He acquired Belgian citizenship and worked as the president of a Congolese trade union. When he came back to Congo, Lumumba founded the Congolese National Movement. Lumumba used Pan-African ideologies to push for independence for his country. Congo gained its independence in January of 1961, partly due to Lumumba's struggle. He garnered a lot of public support for his excellent personality and good communication skills. Lumumba was assassinated at the age of 35 when the army embarked on a mutiny. Kofi Annan. Kofi Annan's name cannot be skipped in any important list of African leaders. Even though he wasn't a mainstream politician, he was a world leader from Africa. Kofi Annan was a Ghanaian diplomat who led the United Nations, UN, as its 7th Secretary General from 1997 to 2006. When he was in charge of the UN, Annan tackled the HIV/AIDS pandemic in Africa. He worked to resolve a lot of conflicts in the world. He and the UN were awarded a Nobel Peace Prize in 2006. His post-UN Secretary General years were also very successful. He served as special envoys and headed several organizations in countries such as Syria and Myanmar. The Kofi Annan Foundation, a charitable and global policy think tank, is just one of the numerous legacy works that owe its existence to Annan. In the early hours of the 18th of August, 2018, news of Annan's death broke out. The distinguished diplomat passed away at the age of 80. Annan will forever be etched into our memories as a great leader who tirelessly fought for global peace and hunger eradication. Thomas Sankara. Thomas Sankara is widely regarded as one of Africa's political heroes. He was a revolutionary who became Burkina Faso's president from 1983 to 1987. Sankara was a strong Pan-Africanist and a supporter of Marxism. He is generally viewed as an icon of revolution, or the Che Guevara of Africa. When he was 20, Sankara joined the army and got trained in Madagascar in 1970. That was where he observed how students revolted against the Madagascan government. This experience changed his life forever. Sankara returned to the Upper Volta in 1980. He went on to seize power in 1983 and changed the country's name from Upper Volta to Burkina Faso. Sadly, Sankara's pursuit of growth, gender equality, and social justice came to an end in 1978. On October 15, 1978, Sankara was brutally assassinated at the age of 37 by his former friend, Campawari, in a military coup. Jomo Kenyatta. His name is one of the biggest in the history of African politics. Jomo Kenyatta was an anti-colonial activist who rose to become the first president of Kenya. He was also the first prime minister of Kenya, 1963 to 1964. Kenyatta played a big role in ensuring that Kenya freed itself from colonial rule. He was the frontline politician in the Kenya National African Union, KANU. His ideologies are that of a nationalist and a conservative. Kenyatta also promoted peace between the country's ethnic groups. He was the one who registered Kenya with the African Union. Kenneth Kaunda. Kenneth Kaunda is a Zambian retired politician who became the country's first president from 1964 to 1991. As a teacher by profession, Kaunda gained a lot of political experiences when he served as a foreign affairs interpreter and advisor in 1949. He worked under Sir Stuart Brown, who was a liberal white colonist. Kaunda later joined the African National Congress and took top positions. He used peaceful protests and negotiations to secure independence for Zambia. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. Africa's first female head of state's name cannot be omitted from this list. We still have some space to honor her and also to balance the political equation. Johnson Sirleaf, commonly known as Africa's Iron Lady, is a former Liberian president who was in office from 2006 to 2018. She is a Harvard graduate with an economics degree who fought hard from prisons and exile and became an inspiration to many young female politicians. By the way, she got a Nobel Peace Prize for laying a suitable foundation for women to establish their future. The one thing that sets the above leaders apart was their unflinching pursuit of progress and peace on the continent. In spite of the enormous challenges that they faced, they always placed themselves at the forefront of developmental issues and prosperity in Africa. The numerous strides that Africa has made in terms of gender equity and social justice can firmly be attributed to the 10 great minds above.